The mountain resort conference center gleamed against the white landscape like a jewel box someone had forgotten to close. Inside, 200 of the wealthiest executives in North America sipped champagne and discussed market trends while outside. The first winter storm of the season gathered strength in the darkening sky. Daniel Carter stood in the service corridor behind the main ballroom, adjusting his bow tie with hands that had once drafted architectural plans for buildings taller than this entire mountain. Now those same hands carried trays of hors d'oeuvres to people who looked through him as if he were made of glass. He checked his watch. 6:15. The gala would run until 9, maybe 10 if the keynote speaker was long-winded. Then he'd have 90 minutes to help break down, change into his street clothes, and catch the last shuttle down the mountain to the valley town, where his daughter waited with Mrs. Chun, the elderly neighbor who watched 7-year-old Sophie whenever Daniel worked these weekend events. The pay was decent. $200 for 6 hours, plus tips if he was lucky. It wasn't the $70,000 salary he'd earned as a junior architect before everything fell apart, but it kept the lights on in their small apartment. It kept Sophie in her after-school art program, the one thing that made her eyes light up the way they used to before her mother died. Through the service door window, Daniel caught a glimpse of the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, women in gowns that cost more than his annual rent. And at the center of it all, holding court near the fireplace, was Alexandra Hayes. Everyone knew Alexandra Hayes. At 42, she had built Hayes Global from a small consulting firm into an empire worth $3.7 billion. She was brilliant, ruthless, and according to every profile Daniel had read while working these events, completely alone. No spouse, no children, no apparent softness anywhere in the armor she wore. She stood now in a dress the color of winter twilight, her dark hair swept back, her posture perfect. She was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Sharp, cold, designed to cut. Daniel had served her twice already tonight. She hadn't looked at him once, hadn't said please or thank you, hadn't acknowledged his existence beyond a dismissive wave when he'd offered her sparkling water instead of champagne. He was used to it. The invisible man. That's what service workers became to people like Alexandra Hayes. Furniture with hands. The kitchen manager appeared at his elbow. Carter, they need more servers in the main room. Hayes just requested the winter vegetable canapes be passed again. Make sure her group gets first priority. Daniel nodded, loaded his tray, and pushed through the service door back into the warmth and light of the ballroom. The first indication that something was wrong came at 7:45. Daniel was near the bar when the lights flickered. Not dramatically, just a brief stutter that made a few guests glance upward with mild concern. Then the sound system cut out mid-song, leaving the ballroom in sudden, jarring silence. The resort manager appeared almost instantly, his professional smile firmly in place. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some minor technical difficulties due to the weather. Please continue enjoying your evening while we resolve this. But Daniel had grown up in Colorado. He knew mountain weather, and he knew that minor technical difficulties during a winter storm usually meant something much worse was coming. He made his way to the windows. Outside, what had been gentle snow flurries 2 hours ago had transformed into something else entirely. The wind drove sheets of white across the grounds, erasing the carefully maintained paths, turning the world into a wall of gray and white chaos. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chun. Storm getting bad down here. Sophie's fine. Don't worry about getting back tonight if it's not safe. Daniel's chest tightened. He texted back quickly. Thank you. Kiss her good night for me. Tell her I love her. Another text appeared immediately. She already knows, dear. She drew you a picture. Says it's you as a superhero. Despite everything, Daniel smiled. Sophie had been drawing him as a superhero for 3 months now, ever since he'd carried her home from school during a rainstorm when she'd been too sick to walk. It was her way of saying she felt safe with him, that no matter how small their apartment or how tight their budget, he was enough. The lights flickered again. This time they stayed off for 5 full seconds before the backup generators kicked in. The ballroom filled with nervous laughter and concerned murmurs. Ladies and gentlemen, the resort manager said, his smile growing strained. I'm afraid the weather has forced us to end the evening early. For your safety, we're asking all guests to return to your rooms. The roads down the mountain have been closed until the storm passes. A wave of protests rippled through the crowd. Alexandra Hayes stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise with the precision of someone used to being obeyed. That's unacceptable. I have a board meeting in Denver tomorrow morning. I need to leave tonight. The manager's professional facade cracked slightly. Ms. Hayes, with all respect, the highway patrol has closed Route 7. There's zero visibility and high avalanche risk. No one is going anywhere until morning at the earliest. Then give me a helicopter. Ma'am, no pilot would fly in these conditions. Alexandra's expression went cold. Then I'll drive myself. Have my car brought around. Ms. Hayes, I cannot allow. You cannot allow. Her voice dropped to something dangerous. Do you know who I am? Do you understand that I have obligations that don't pause for inconvenient weather? Daniel watched this exchange from his position near the service door. He'd seen this before, this absolute certainty that money and power could override physics and common sense. He'd seen it in clients who demanded impossible architectural deadlines. He'd seen it in hospital administrators who'd insisted his wife's experimental treatment could wait until after the weekend because it was more cost-effective. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. People like Alexandra Hayes believed the world bent to their will. Until suddenly, catastrophically, it didn't. The manager was shaking his head. I'm sorry, but for your own safety. Alexandra turned away from him mid-sentence, pulled out her phone, and began making calls. Daniel could see the frustration building in her shoulders, the way her free hand clenched and unclenched. Whoever she was calling wasn't answering. The storm had probably taken out cell towers. 20 minutes later, most of the guests had retreated to their rooms, grumbling but resigned. The staff began breaking down the event space, moving efficiently through the routine they'd performed 100 times. Daniel was helping fold tablecloths when he saw Alexandra slip toward the side exit, car keys in hand. His stomach dropped. She was actually going to try it. She was going to drive down the mountain in whiteout conditions because she couldn't accept that the universe had told her no. He should let her. It wasn't his business. She was an adult who'd made her choice. And besides, she probably had four-wheel drive and more winter driving experience than he was giving her credit for. But then he thought of Sophie's drawing. You as a superhero, Daddy. He thought of his wife, Sarah, the way she'd looked at him in those final days, the way she'd made him promise to stay the kind of man she'd fallen in love with. Don't let the world make you hard, Danny. Don't let it make you small. Daniel dropped the tablecloth and ran. The side exit opened into a service area where resort vehicles were parked. The wind hit Daniel like a physical force, stealing his breath, driving snow into his eyes. He could barely see 3 feet ahead. Ms. Hayes! He had to shout to be heard over the wind. Ms. Hayes, wait! She turned, surprise flashing across her face. For the first time all evening, she actually looked at him. Really looked at him. What do you want? You can't drive in this. Please. The visibility is 0 and the roads are ice. Her expression hardened. I don't recall asking for your opinion. I grew up in these mountains. This storm is only getting worse. If you go out there now, you won't make it half a mile. Then I'll turn back. She pressed her key fob. Somewhere in the white chaos, a car chirped in response. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have places to be. She started walking toward the sound. Daniel followed, his server's uniform already soaked through, his dress, shoes, sliding on ice he couldn't see. Miss Hayes, I'm begging you. Wait until morning. It's just one night. She whirled on him, eyes blazing. Just one night? Do you have any idea what just one night cost me? Do you understand that while I'm trapped here, my competitors are moving, deals are closing, opportunities are vanishing? Her voice rose, competing with the wind. I didn't build my company by waiting for perfect conditions. I built it by doing what others wouldn't. You built it by surviving, Daniel shot back. And you won't survive this. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not quite doubt, but something softer. Then it was gone, replaced by pure determination. Go back inside, she said. This doesn't concern you. She found her car, a luxury SUV that probably cost more than Daniel would earn 5 years. She climbed in, started the engine, and before Daniel could say anything else, she was gone, taillights disappearing into the white void within seconds. Daniel stood in the screaming wind, snow collecting on his shoulders, feeling like he'd just watched someone jump off a cliff. He turned to go back inside, made it 3 steps, then stopped. "You as a superhero, Daddy. Don't let the world make you hard, Danny." "Damn it." He said it quietly, to no one but the storm. Then he ran toward the resort's equipment garage. The snowmobile was old, probably kept more for emergencies than regular use. Daniel had driven them before, years ago when he and Sarah used to come up to his uncle's cabin in the winter. His hands remembered the controls, even as his mind screamed that this was insane. He had no business going after her. He had a daughter who needed him. He had a life, however fragile, that he couldn't afford to risk. But he also had a conscience that wouldn't let him sleep if he didn't try. The snowmobile roared to life. Daniel pulled on a heavy jacket he found hanging on the wall, grabbed a coil of rope and a first aid kit from the emergency supplies, and drove out into the storm. The road down the mountain was barely visible, marked only by posts that appeared and vanished in the snow like ghosts. Daniel followed them, his eyes burning from the cold and wind, his entire body already numb. He'd gone maybe a mile when he found her. The SUV was nose down in a drainage ditch, its front end crumpled against a boulder, steam rising from the destroyed engine. The driver's side door hung open, and there, 20 feet from the wreck, Alexandra Hayes lay motionless in the snow. Daniel killed the snowmobile engine and ran to her side, his server's uniform and borrowed jacket providing almost no protection against the cold that bit through to his bones. She was unconscious, her face pale, a cut above her left eyebrow bleeding sluggishly. Her expensive dress was torn, one shoe missing. She was breathing, but shallow and labored. "Ms. Hayes." He touched her shoulder gently, then with more urgency. "Ms. Hayes, can you hear me?" No response. Daniel quickly checked for obvious injuries. No visible broken bones, but the way she was lying suggested possible spinal damage. Moving her could make things worse, but leaving her here would definitely kill her. The temperature was dropping fast. The wind chill had to be well below 0. She wasn't dressed for this. Neither was he, really, but at least he had the jacket. He looked back toward the resort. Too far. She'd freeze before he could get help and return. He looked down the mountain, maybe 2 miles to the main highway, but the highway was closed. No traffic, no help. He pulled out his phone. No signal. The storm had taken everything, which left one option. The option he'd been avoiding thinking about because it seemed impossible. The ranger station. His uncle had taken him there once, maybe 15 years ago. It sat in a valley about 6 miles east of the road, accessible by a trail that wound through the forest. It was basic, primitive, but it had a fireplace, supplies, and most importantly, a radio that could call for help. 6 miles, in a blizzard, carrying an unconscious woman. Daniel looked down at Alexandra Hayes, the woman who hadn't said thank you, the woman who dismissed him as furniture, the woman who'd driven into a storm because she couldn't imagine the universe not bending to her will, the woman who would die if he didn't try. He removed his borrowed jacket and wrapped it around her as best he could. Then he tied the rope around both their waists, creating a makeshift harness. If he fell, at least she wouldn't be lost in the snow. He knelt, worked his arms beneath her, and with a grunt of effort, lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he'd expected. All that power, all that wealth, all that fierce determination, and she weighed maybe 120 pounds. Daniel adjusted his grip, settled her weight against his chest, and began to walk. The first mile was the hardest. The trail wasn't maintained in winter, and finding it through the storm required Daniel to stop every few minutes to orient himself by the trees, by the slope of the ground, by half-remembered landmarks from a trip he'd taken when he was barely 20 years old. His arms burned. His legs trembled. The cold was a living thing, trying to find its way into his chest, his lungs, his heart. Alexandra's head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. That warmth was the only thing that told him she was still alive. "Stay with me," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "Just stay with me. I've got you. He thought of Sophie. Wondered if he'd ever see her again. Wondered if Mrs. Chun would know how to explain to a 7-year-old that her daddy had frozen to death, trying to save someone who'd never even learned his name. The wind screamed. The snow drove into his face like needles. His dress shoes, never meant for this, were soaked through, his feet beyond feeling. But he kept walking. You as a superhero, Daddy. Second mile. His vision was starting to blur. The cold was getting inside now, slowing his thoughts, making his movements clumsy. He stumbled, caught himself, almost dropped Alexandra. The rope around their waists went taut, holding them together. Come on, he said through chattering teeth. Come on, Danny. Don't you quit. He heard Sarah's voice, not really, but remembered from that last day in a hospital. You're the strongest man I know. Not because you never fall, because you always get back up. Third mile. He couldn't feel his hands anymore. Alexandra's weight, which had seemed manageable at first, now felt like carrying stone. Every step was an argument with his body, which screamed at him to stop, to rest, to just put her down for a minute. He didn't stop. Fourth mile. He was hallucinating now. He saw Sarah standing among the trees, smiling at him. He saw Sophie holding up her superhero drawing. He saw his uncle laughing, saying the ranger station was just around the next bend. Just keep going, Danny boy. The forest around him looked the same in every direction. White, gray, cold, endless. What if he'd gotten turned around? What if the ranger station wasn't where he remembered? What if he was walking them both to their deaths? Alexandra stirred against him. A small sound, half moan, half whimper. I know, Daniel whispered. I know it hurts. I know you're scared. But I've got you. I promise. I've got you. Fifth mile. He fell. Just went down, his legs finally giving out, both of them crashing into snow that came up past his knees. For a long moment, he just lay there, Alexandra still in his arms, the rope holding them together. This was it. This was as far as he could go. He tried. God, he tried. Sophie would understand. Sarah would understand. He closed his eyes, and then Alexandra spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken, but it cut through everything. Daniel. His eyes snapped open. She was looking at him. Her eyes unfocused, glassy with pain, but open. Looking at him. How? His voice wouldn't work. How do you know my name? Your name tag. Each word seemed to cost her. At the gala. I saw it. She'd seen it. She'd seen him. Not furniture. Not invisible. You came after me. It wasn't a question. Why? Daniel didn't have a good answer. Didn't have any answer that made sense. Because someone had to, he said finally. Something moved in her eyes. Something that might have been understanding. Might have been shame. Might have been the first crack in the armor she'd worn so long. I'm sorry, she whispered. And then her eyes closed again, and she went limp in his arms. But those two words, spoken by a woman who probably never apologized to anyone, gave Daniel what he needed. He climbed his feet, adjusted his grip, and kept walking. 6 mile. He smelled smoke. At first, he thought he was hallucinating again. But no, there was faint but real. Wood smoke. And then, through the trees, he saw it. A small structure, barely more than a cabin, snow-covered but solid. The ranger station. Daniel's legs moved on pure will now. Nothing else. He reached the door, kicked it open since his hands couldn't grip the handle, and stumbled inside. The interior was dark, cold, but blessedly out of the wind. Daniel laid Alexandra on the floor as gently as his shaking arms allowed, then forced himself to move. There was wood stacked by the fireplace, matches in a tin box on the mantel. His hands wouldn't cooperate, but eventually, miraculously, he got a fire started. Heat began to fill the small space. Daniel stripped off Alexandra's wet clothes, found emergency blankets in a cabinet, and wrapped her in layers. Then he did the same for himself, his movements mechanical, barely conscious. The radio. He needed to use the radio. He found it on a shelf, hand cranked it to life, and called for help. His voice sounded like someone else's. The dispatcher's response was distant, tinny, but they'd heard him. Help was coming. Maybe 2 hours, given the conditions, but coming. Daniel collapsed beside Alexandra, pulling blankets around them both. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside, but they were alive. Against all odds, They were alive. He looked at her face, peaceful now, in unconsciousness, the hard edges softened. She'd called him by name. She'd apologized. Maybe she wasn't so impossible after all. Maybe nobody was. Daniel closed his eyes just for a moment, just to rest. When he opened them again, her eyes were open too, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "You carried me," she said, her voice stronger now. 20 miles. 6, he corrected. Felt like 20. Why? There was that question again. Why had he risked everything for a stranger who treated him like he was nothing? Because, he said quietly, someone taught me that who we are isn't determined by how people treat us. It's determined by how we treat them. Tears formed in Alexandra's eyes. Real tears, cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. "I don't even know your last name." "Carter. Daniel Carter." She studied him for a long moment. "I think you might have just saved my life, Daniel Carter." "I think I did, Alexandra Hayes." She tried to smile. It came out broken, but genuine. "My friends call me Alex. I don't think I qualify as a friend. After tonight?" She shook her head slightly. "I think you might be the only real one I have." Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the ranger station, something warmer than the fire had begun to burn. Two strangers from opposite worlds, bound together by snow and survival and a single act of impossible kindness. And somewhere down the mountain, a 7-year-old girl slept peacefully, clutching a drawing of her father dressed as a superhero, completely unaware that her picture had just come true. The rescue team arrived 2 hours after dawn, when the storm had finally exhausted itself and left the world wrapped in crystalline silence. Daniel heard the snowmobiles first, their engines cutting through the quiet like chainsaws. He'd been awake most of the night, feeding the fire, monitoring Alexandra's breathing, making sure hypothermia didn't claim what the storm couldn't. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes murmuring things he couldn't understand. Once she called out a name, Catherine, with such longing it made his chest ache. Once she'd reached for his hand in her sleep and held it like a child afraid of the dark. Now, as the paramedics burst through the door with their equipment and efficient concern, Alexandra's eyes found his across the small cabin. "Don't leave," she said. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "I'm not going anywhere," Daniel promised. They loaded her onto a stretcher, checking vitals, asking questions about injuries and symptoms. The lead paramedic, a woman named Rita with kind eyes, turned to Daniel. "You saved her life. 6 miles through that storm." She shook her head in disbelief. "That's not human. That's something else." Daniel didn't feel like something else. He felt like a man who'd made it through on stubbornness and the memory of a 7-year-old's drawing. "Is there someone you need to call?" Rita asked gently. "Someone who's worried about you?" "Sophie." "Oh God, Sophie." Daniel pulled out his phone, miraculously still functional despite everything. 3% battery. No service inside the cabin, but maybe outside. He stepped into the blinding white world, breath visible in the frigid air, and watched his phone search desperately for a signal. 1 bar appeared, then 2. He called Mrs. Chun. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel? Oh, thank God. We've been so worried. The news said the storm was catastrophic, and you weren't answering," and Sophie kept asking. "I'm okay." Daniel interrupted, his voice rough. "I'm safe. Is Sophie? She's right here. She's been up since 5, watching for any news." "Hold on." A pause. Then his daughter's voice, small and scared and trying so hard to be brave. "Daddy." Daniel's knees almost buckled. "Hey, sweetheart. Are you okay?" "Mrs. Chun said the storm was really bad and you couldn't come home, and I was worried that." Her voice broke. "I was worried you wouldn't come back." "Sophie, listen to me." Daniel sat down in the snow, not trusting his legs. "I will always come back to you. Always. Do you understand?" "Promise." "I promise. Cross my heart." He heard her exhale, imagined her nodding the way she did when she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. "I drew you another picture," she said. "It's you in the snow, being a superhero. Did you save someone, Daddy?" Daniel looked back at the cabin, where paramedics were preparing to transport Alexandra. "Yeah, baby. I think maybe I did." "I knew it." Pride filled her voice. "Mrs. Chun said you were probably just stuck, but I knew you were helping someone. You're pretty smart, you know that." I get it from you. Daniel laughed, the sound catching in his throat. I love you, Sophie. So much. I love you too, Daddy. When are you coming home? Soon. Maybe this afternoon. And then I'm not going anywhere for a while. We'll have movie night, okay? Your choice. Even if I pick the princess movie you say is too long. Even then, Rita appeared at the cabin door, gesturing that they were ready to move. I have to go, sweetheart, but I'll see you in a few hours. Okay, Daddy. Yeah. I'm glad you're a superhero. His eyes burned. I'm glad you think so. He ended the call and stood, brushing snow from his borrowed pants. His server's uniform was destroyed, his dress shoes held together by prayer and willpower. He looked like a disaster. He felt like one too. But Sophie thought he was a superhero. And for now, that was enough. The hospital in the valley town was small but well-equipped. They took Alexandra to a private room while doctors checked for concussion, hypothermia complications, and internal injuries. Daniel was given his own examination room, heated blankets, warm clothes donated by the hospital staff, and enough hot coffee to revive a corpse. The doctor who treated him was a man in his 60s with weathered hands and a no-nonsense manner. You're lucky, he said, checking Daniel's feet for frostbite. Another hour, and you'd be looking at amputations. As it is, you'll have some nerve damage. Numbness, tingling. Might be permanent. Daniel nodded. Small price to pay. The woman you saved, the doctor continued. Alexandra Hayes. She's asking for you. Won't stop asking, actually. Driving the nurses crazy. Is she okay? Mild concussion, bruised ribs, moderate hypothermia that would have been severe if you hadn't gotten her warm when you did. The doctor met his eyes. You did good, son. Real good. 20 minutes later, Daniel stood outside Alexandra's room, suddenly uncertain. In the chaos of survival, they'd been just two people trying not to die. But now, in the fluorescent light of a hospital corridor, reality reasserted itself. She was Alexandra Hayes, billionaire, CEO, a woman whose shoes probably cost more than his monthly rent. He was Daniel Carter, server, single father, a man whose greatest achievement lately was getting Sophie to eat vegetables without complaint. What did they have to say to each other now that the storm was over? He knocked softly. Her voice came immediately. Come in. Alexandra sat propped up in bed, hospital gown replacing the designer dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Without makeup, without the armor of wealth, she looked younger. Vulnerable. Human. Daniel. She said his name like it mattered. Thank you for coming. He stepped inside, suddenly aware of his borrowed sweatpants and oversized jacket. How are you feeling? Like I drove into a ditch and got carried 6 miles through a blizzard. A small smile touched her lips. The doctors say I'm incredibly lucky. They say if you hadn't found me when you did, I'd be dead. Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No. Her voice was firm. They wouldn't have. Most people would have let me face the consequences of my own stupidity. You had every reason to let me freeze. I treated you like you were nothing. If you didn't know me, that's not an excuse. She looked down at her hands. I've spent the last 20 years treating everyone like they're nothing unless they can do something for me. Staff, employees, even... She trailed off. Even the people I should have valued most. The name she called in her sleep came back to Daniel. Catherine. Alexandra's head snapped up. I said that name. A few times. You seemed upset. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Catherine was my sister. Younger by 3 years. She died 15 years ago. I'm sorry. She was a teacher. Elementary school. Made $32,000 a year and loved every minute of it. Alexandra's eyes were distant, seeing the past. I used to tell her she was wasting her potential, that she could do so much more if she just tried. If she just wanted success the way I did. Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed, listening. We had a fight. Right before she died, I told her she was settling, that she'd never amount to anything if she kept choosing fulfillment over ambition. Alexandra's voice cracked. 2 days later, she had an aneurysm, just collapsed in her classroom, gone before the ambulance arrived. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? The last thing I said to my sister was that her life wasn't good enough, that she wasn't good enough, Tears slipped down her cheeks. And I've spent 15 years proving her wrong. Building an empire. Making billions. Showing the world that I was right to choose ambition. She looked at Daniel directly. But last night, lying in that snow, I kept seeing her face. Kept hearing her voice telling me that all the money in the world doesn't mean anything if you die alone. And I realized she was right. She was always right. Daniel thought of Sarah, of the last conversation they'd had before she went into surgery for the final time. She'd made him promise to stay human, to stay soft, to never let success matter more than Sophie. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. My wife died 3 years ago, he said quietly. Cancer. It took 18 months and cost us everything. Our savings, our house, my career. By the end, I lost my job because I took too much time off to be with her. They said I wasn't dedicated enough. Alexandra's eyes widened. That's unconscionable. That's reality for people like me. People who don't have safety nets. Who can't afford to put work second, even when their family is dying. He met her gaze. I was an architect. Junior level, but I loved it. I designed beautiful things. Then Sarah got sick, and I had to choose. My career or her last months. It wasn't really a choice. You gave up everything for her. I'd do it again. Daniel's voice was steady. Because at the end, when she was gone and I was alone with Sophie, I could look at myself in the mirror. I could tell my daughter that I never left her mother. That I was there every day, holding her hand. Sophie, Alexandra said softly. Your daughter, the one you were texting about at the resort. 7 years old, loves drawing and believes I'm a superhero. He smiled despite everything. She's the reason I kept walking last night. Every time I wanted to stop, I thought about her waiting for me. Does she know? About what you did. Not the details. Just that I helped someone. Alexandra was quiet, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. What? He finally asked. I'm trying to understand, she said slowly, how someone who lost everything still has more than I do. How someone who serves hors d'oeuvres is richer than a woman worth billions. I have Sophie. That's not nothing. No. Alexandra's voice was thick with emotion. It's everything. And I have no one. No children. No partner. No friends who'd notice if I disappeared. Just colleagues and employees who value me for what I can do for them. You could change that. Could I? She laughed bitterly. I'm 42 years old. I've spent 2 decades building walls so high I can't see over them anymore. I don't know how to be soft. I don't know how to let people in. Daniel thought about this. About the woman who dismissed him at the gala and the woman lying in this hospital bed asking for help. You let me in, he said. Last night in the cabin. You held my hand. You told me your sister's name. That's a start. That was different. We were dying. We were alive, Daniel corrected. Maybe for the first time in a long time. No walls. No roles. Just 2 people trying to survive. Alexandra wiped her eyes. I don't want to go back to who I was. The woman who drove into that storm because a board meeting mattered more than common sense. I don't want to be her anymore. Then don't be. It's not that simple. Why not? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Because she didn't have a good reason. Just fear. Just habit. Just the weight of 15 years spent running from her sister's memory. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse entered, professional and apologetic. Ms. Hayes, there's several people in the lobby demanding to see you. Your assistant, your legal counsel, and someone claiming to be from the board of directors. Alexandra's expression immediately shifted. Walls going back up, armor reassembling itself. Tell them to wait. They've been quite insistent. I don't care. Tell them I'll see them when I'm ready. The nurse nodded and left. Daniel stood to go. You don't have to leave, Alexandra said quickly. You have business to handle. I should get home to Sophie anyway. Daniel. She caught his hand. Will I see you again? He looked down at their joined hands. CEO and server. Billionaire and single dad. 2 worlds that shouldn't touch. I don't know, he said honestly. Our lives are pretty different. Because of money. Because of everything. You have board meetings and corporate empires. I have rent to pay and parent-teacher conferences. And if I told you, she said slowly, That I'd rather have what you have? That I'd trade all of it for one person who looks at me the way your daughter looks at you? Daniel's chest tightened. Then I'd say you're still recovering from hypothermia and not thinking clearly. She laughed, the sound genuine. Maybe, but I don't think so. She squeezed his hand. At least let me thank you properly. A proper meal. You and Sophie. Please. You should say no. Should keep the distance that made sense. But looking at her now, vulnerable and honest, and asking for something as simple as dinner, he couldn't. Okay, he said. Dinner. But Sophie picks the place. And I'm warning you, she has questionable taste. I don't care if it's fast food and chicken nuggets. She paused. I just don't want last night to be the only time I got to know the real you. The real me serves appetizers and struggles to make rent. The real you carried a stranger 6 miles through a blizzard because it was the right thing to do. That's the person I want to know. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. He gently extracted his hand from hers and moved toward the door. Daniel, she called. He turned back. Thank you. For my life. For your honesty. For not treating me like I'm made of money. You're not made of money, he said simply. You're made of the same stuff as everyone else. Fear and hope and a need to matter to someone. He left her staring after him, something like wonder in her eyes. The bus ride down the mountain took 2 hours. Daniel sat by the window, watching the snow-covered landscape pass, his mind churning. What had he done? What was he doing? Getting involved with Alexandra Hayes was like juggling fire. She lived in a world of private jets and boardrooms. He lived paycheck to paycheck, measuring success by whether Sophie had new shoes when she needed them. But he kept thinking about the way she'd held his hand in the cabin, the way she'd cried talking about her sister, the way she'd asked, genuinely asked, if she could know him better. Maybe wealth and power didn't make people inhuman. Maybe they just made them lonely. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Alexandra. The nurse helped me get your number from the hospital records. I hope that's not too invasive. I just wanted to say thank you again, and to tell you that I've been thinking about what you said, about not going back to who I was. I'm going to try. I don't know how, but I'm going to try. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, trying is all any of us can do. Good luck with your board meeting. Her response came immediately. I'm postponing it. They can wait. Some things are more important. Daniel smiled, despite himself. Maybe she really was trying. Mrs. Chin's apartment smelled like jasmine tea and fresh-baked cookies. Sophie launched herself at Daniel the moment he walked through the door, wrapping her arms around his waist with a ferocity that stole his breath. Daddy, you're home. He lifted her, spinning her around the way she loved, feeling his sore muscles protest and not caring at all. I'm home, sweetheart. I'm right here. Mrs. Chin watched from her kitchen doorway, eyes soft. She was very brave, but I think she's glad to have you back. I'm glad to be back. Daniel set Sophie down, but kept hold of her hand. Thank you for taking care of her. Always. Mrs. Chun hesitated. The news mentioned the storm. They said someone was rescued from the ranger station. Was that you? Yeah. It was an eventful night. The woman they mentioned. Alexandra Hayes. That's the CEO of Hayes Global. I know. Mrs. Chun studied him. You saved her life. I helped. That's all. That's everything, Daniel. Don't minimize it. Sophie tugged his hand. Can we go home now? I want to show you my new pictures. I drew so many. Of course. Let's go home. Their apartment was small, a one-bedroom in an older building where the heat was inconsistent and the hallway carpet had seen better decades. But it was theirs. Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator. Her books overflowed from homemade shelves. Her laughter filled the space with light that had nothing to do with the single overhead fixture. Daniel made mac and cheese from a box while Sophie spread her drawings across the kitchen table, narrating each one with the seriousness of a gallery curator. This one is you rescuing a cat from a tree. And this one is you stopping a runaway bus. And this one, she held up her latest creation, is you in the snow, carrying someone. Like I said on the phone, Daniel looked at the drawing. 2 stick figures, one carrying the other, snowflakes falling around them. Sophie had drawn a heart above the scene. It's beautiful, baby. The person you're carrying, Sophie said, tilting her head. Is that the lady from the news? The rich one. Daniel blinked. You saw the news? Mrs. Chun had it on. They said a billionaire crashed her car and someone saved her. Sophie's eyes were too knowing. Was it you? No point lying. Sophie had inherited her mother's ability to see through him. Yes. Is she nice? That was a harder question. Was Alexandra nice? She'd been cold, dismissive, arrogant. She'd also been vulnerable, honest, and genuinely sorry. I think she's trying to be, Daniel said carefully. Good. Because of my drawing, she looks happy. See, Sophie pointed to the stick figure smile. I think people should be happy. Even rich people. Even rich people, Daniel agreed. They ate dinner on the couch, watching Sophie's princess movie, the one that was too long but made her eyes shine. Halfway through, she fell asleep against his shoulder, her breathing deep and steady. Daniel held her, feeling the weight of her trust. This little girl believed he could save anyone, believed he was invincible. He thought about Alexandra in her hospital bed, talking about walls and loneliness. He thought about carrying her through the storm, feeling her heart beat against his chest. He thought about the fact that saving someone's life created a bond that didn't break just because the crisis ended. His phone buzzed softly. Another text from Alexandra. I spoke to my board, told them the company needs structural changes, starting with how we treat employees. They think I'm having a breakdown. Maybe I am, but it feels like waking up. Daniel typed one-handed, careful not to disturb Sophie. Waking up is hard, but it's worth it. Will you help me? I know that's asking a lot, but I don't know how to do this alone. Daniel looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully, at the apartment that barely felt warm enough, at the stack of bills on the counter he couldn't quite pay. He should say no, should protect himself and Sophie from the complications that came with someone like Alexandra Hayes. But he'd carried her through a blizzard. He'd felt her hold his hand like she was drowning. He'd heard her cry about a sister she'd lost and a life she'd wasted. I'll help, he typed. But you have to promise something. Anything. You have to actually change. Not just talk about it. Actually do the work. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I promise. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. He set his phone down and looked at Sophie's drawing on the table. 2 stick figures in the snow, a heart floating above them. His daughter believed in superheroes. And maybe, just maybe, he could help a lost billionaire remember how to be human. It wasn't the life he'd planned. But then again, nothing in the last 3 years had been. He kissed Sophie's hair and settled in to finish the movie, letting himself imagine, just for a moment, what it might mean to build something real from the ashes of that impossible night. The following week passed in a strange blur. Daniel returned to work at the resort, serving at corporate events and weddings, fielding curious questions from co-workers who'd heard about the rescue. Is it true you carried her 6 miles? Did she really give you a reward? Are you, friends with her now? Daniel deflected with practiced ease. He wasn't friends with Alexandra Hayes. He was just someone who'd helped her when she needed it. But the text messages kept coming. I met with HR today. We're restructuring parental leave policies. 12 weeks paid, guaranteed job security. I kept thinking about what you said, about choosing between your wife and your career. I had lunch with my chief of operations. Asked him when he last took a vacation. He couldn't remember. That's going to change. The board is fighting me on some changes. They say I'm being emotional. I told them emotions are what we've been missing. They did not react well. Each message was a small window into her world. Daniel found himself responding more than he should, offering perspective from someone who'd lived on the other side of the corporate divide. Maybe frame it as retention strategy. Happy employees stay longer. That's language boards understand. Emotions aren't weakness. They're just information. Use them. Keep pushing. Change is always hard, but it's worth it. On Thursday, she called instead of texting. Daniel, I hope I'm not bothering you. He was washing dishes while Sophie did homework at the kitchen table. The normalcy of the moment contrasted sharply with hearing Alexandra's voice in his ear. You're fine. What's up? I wanted to apologize for involving you in my corporate drama. You have your own life. I shouldn't be using you as a therapist. Is that what you're doing? A pause. Maybe. I don't have anyone else who tells me the truth. Everyone in my world has an agenda, but you don't need anything from me. Daniel thought about his overdue electric bill. About the fact that Sophie's school was asking for money for a field trip he couldn't afford. He needed plenty, but he didn't need it from her. That's not entirely true, he said honestly. But I'm not asking for anything. What if I wanted to give? Then I'd say we're not there yet. We barely know each other. I know you carried me 6 miles. I know you have a daughter who draws pictures of you as a superhero. I know you gave up your career to be with your dying wife. Her voice was soft. I think I know the important things. Those are facts. Not knowing. Then help me know more. Dinner. This weekend. You and Sophie. Please. Daniel looked at Sophie, bent over her math homework, tongue poking out in concentration. Let me ask Sophie. It's her weekend too. He covered the phone. Hey, sweetheart. Remember the lady from the news? She wants to have dinner with us this Saturday. What do you think? Sophie's head snapped up. The one you saved? Really? Really? His daughter's eyes lit up. Can we go? Please? I want to meet her. I want to show her my drawings. Daniel smiled. I think that's a yes, he told Alexandra. Thank you. The relief in her voice was palpable. Where would Sophie like to go? You don't want to know. Try me. Daniel sighed. There's a pizza place called Freddy's. It has arcade games and animatronic animals that sing. It's loud, chaotic, and the pizza is mediocre at best. Perfect. What time? You're serious. Daniel, I ate at a Michelin 3-star restaurant last week and felt nothing. I'd rather have mediocre pizza with people who make me feel human. 6 o'clock. I'll be there. After he hung up, Sophie climbed into his lap, eyes shining. Is she nice, Daddy? Really? I think she's learning how to be. That's okay. We can teach her. Sophie nodded seriously. That's what friends do. We're not exactly friends. Not yet, Sophie said, echoing Alexandra's earlier words with uncanny accuracy. But maybe soon. Daniel hugged his daughter close, hoping she was right, hoping this wouldn't end in disappointment, hoping that a billionaire and a single father could find common ground somewhere between their impossible worlds. Outside the kitchen window, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle this time, nothing like the storm that had changed everything. But Daniel Carter had learned that the gentlest things could be the most transformative. A daughter's drawing, a dying wife's whispered promise, a stranger's hand held in the dark. Maybe there was room for one more impossible thing. Maybe there was room for hope. Saturday arrived with clear skies and Sophie's infectious excitement. She'd changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on her favorite purple dress with a sparkly collar, the one she saved for special occasions. Do I look okay, Daddy? She asked for the 5th time as they walked into Freddy's. You look perfect, sweetheart. Alexandra was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking magnificently out of place in designer jeans and a simple cashmere sweater. But when she saw them, her face transformed with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Sophie, she said warmly as they approached, your dad has told me so much about you. Sophie studied her with the unflinching directness of 7-year-olds. You're prettier than on TV. Alexandra laughed, surprised. Thank you. You're exactly as wonderful as I imagined. Over mediocre pizza and the cacophony of arcade games, something remarkable happened. Alexandra didn't check her phone once. She listened to Sophie explain every single one of her drawings with genuine interest. She played skee-ball and didn't mind losing. She wore a paper crown from Sophie's kids' meal and didn't seem to notice the stares from other diners who recognized her. She was just Alex, not the CEO, not the billionaire, just a woman learning how to be present. My daddy's a superhero, Sophie announced, showing Alexandra the now famous drawing. He saves people. He saved me, Alexandra said softly, meeting Daniel's eyes across the table. I'm very lucky he did. Are you going to be our friend now? Sophie asked with characteristic bluntness. Alexandra looked at Daniel, something vulnerable in her expression. I hope so. If your dad thinks I'm worth being friends with. Daniel thought about the woman who'd dismissed him at the gala, about the woman who'd apologized in the snow, about the person sitting here now, wearing a paper crown and genuinely caring about a 7-year-old's drawings. I think, he said slowly, that you already are. The weeks that followed brought unexpected changes. Alexandra showed up at Sophie's school art show. She invited them to a private screening at a local theater. Sophie's choice of movie, of course. She learned to text less about business and more about small moments. Tried coffee from food truck today. Tasted better than anything my private chef makes. In return, Daniel let her into the complicated reality of his life. The struggle with bills. The exhaustion of single parenthood. The grief that still ambushed him at unexpected moments. She listened, really listened, and slowly, impossibly, two separate worlds began to merge. One evening, 3 months after the storm, Alexandra asked to speak with Daniel alone. They sat in a quiet cafe while Sophie had a play date with a school friend. "I've been thinking," Alexandra began, nervous in a way he'd never seen her, "about what my sister would say if she could see me now. See us. What would she say? That it took almost dying to make me start living." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "Daniel, you gave me more than my life back. You gave me a reason to deserve it. You always deserved it." "No, I didn't, but I'm trying to now." She took a breath. "I'm restructuring my role at the company, stepping back from day-to-day operations. I want time for things that matter. People who matter." Daniel's heart raced. "Alex, I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know our worlds are different. But I also know that I've never felt more myself than when I'm with you and Sophie. That has to mean something." Daniel thought about Sarah's final words. "Don't let the world make you hard. Don't let it make you small." He thought about Sophie's drawing, about carrying a stranger through a blizzard, about the impossible becoming possible. "It means everything," he said quietly. "It means maybe superheroes are real, and maybe they come in unexpected forms." Alexandra's eyes filled with tears. "Maybe they come in the form of single dads who see people instead of paychecks, or billionaires who learn to wear paper crowns." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people from impossible worlds who'd found something more valuable than wealth or status. They'd found each other, and that, Daniel realized, was the real rescue. Not the one in the snow, but this, two broken people becoming whole together. Outside, snow began to fall again. But this time, neither of them was afraid. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.